Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we continue my top 3 recommended Horus Heresy reads for each and every Primarch with Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion. A general spoiler warning to begin here, as I will briefly mention the events of the novels that I recommend, so just keep that in mind as we move forward. But with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, so I'm going to do things a bit differently today and give my honourable mentions after my top 3 recommendations, as it'll just make a little bit more sense that way. However, kicking off my first Horus Heresy recommendation for Roboute Guilliman, I have The Unremembered Empire by author Dan Abnett. This novel takes place following the events of Lorgar's betrayal and the assault on Ultramar within Know No Fear and Betrayer. Guilliman and the Ultramarines have largely weathered the Shadow Crusade of the Wordbearers and the World Eaters fairly well, and now they are simply cut off from the goings-on of the heresy across the galaxy, thanks to the galaxy-spanning Ruin Storm, thus spawning Guilliman's desire to found a new Imperium, to keep the flame alive until he knows the fate of the Emperor. And this is the beginning of that story arc, with Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels Legion arriving to judge Guilliman's intent. And it's a fantastic dive into Guilliman's character here, really giving us a great perspective on how Guilliman feels about a lot of different things, being able to see him in the comfortable surroundings of Macragge. And the arriving presence of Lionel Johnson, someone who themselves is entirely confident in feeling superior to him, and who directly questions Roboute, adds a fantastic dynamic and element that we very rarely see Guilliman have to contend with it usually being Guilliman the one doing the judging and making those around him feel inferior. And it's this novel more than any other that founds the rocky relationship between the two of them, something more important now than ever within the current timeline, thanks to L. Johnson's return to the galaxy. And it's a great read. Guilliman distrustful of the Lion distrustful of Guilliman, Macragge a mere breath away from a full-on invasion, and the maddened Conrad Kurz arriving to unleash carnage as well. Honestly, Guilliman's desire and decision with founding Imperium Secundus is a really integral piece of understanding his character. That Empire Builder aspect, something that he continues to do 10,000 years later, that he just can't help, and something that just keeps causing him problems. This one is hands down my favourite Roboute Guilliman novel of the Heresy. However, next, my second top 3 recommended Heresy read for Roboute Guilliman is the novel Ruin Storm by author David Annandale. The Unremembered Empire may have began the Imperium Secundus storyline, however it is Ruin Storm that ends it. This one takes place after the trio of Roboute Guilliman, Lionel Johnson and the Angel Sanguinius come to the realisation that the throne world does indeed still stand, and that everything they have done has been a heresy, and thus it follows their crusade to break the storm and reach the throne world, to be there to aid their father. Now, there's a lot of L. Johnson and Sanguinius action in here too, the structure mainly swapping between the 3 of them, but it provides a really intriguing look at the relationships of the 3 post-Imperium Secundus, the burden of their guilt. The 3 of course work together in their loyalty, but there is undoubted strain and difficulties that have been left upon them. Not just the sense of their folly, but the conflicts and clashes that have arisen between them too. It's pretty rare to have a story of 3 Primarchs each at the head of their legions, so it's a pretty cool premise, this one. And of course it all builds to the fateful decision that will see the Angel reach the throne world, but not the Lion or Guilliman. A poignant final farewell between them. A definitely underrated read in my opinion. However, speaking of underrated, my final top recommended heresy read for Roboute Guilliman is Know No Fear by author Dan Abnett, which is actually one of the novels I mentioned as one of the Horus Heresy series most underrated a few weeks ago. However, this covers a pivotal moment in Guilliman's life with the Battle of Calth, the Great Betrayal, believed to be a peaceful rendezvous with Lorgar and the Wordbearers, already a nervous one with it being the first meeting between the legions since Monarchia. Guilliman's world would abruptly come crashing down around him as he witnesses two legions going to war. It's one of the very few times you will ever see Roboute completely lose his cool, displaying nothing but unbridled anger, and it's clearly a moment that leaves its mark upon him. But being able to watch this event play out from Ultramarine eyes, the skeptical build-up to the meeting, the complete confusion as fire erupts between them, and then the dread of certainty settling down upon them, of betrayal, and what that betrayal means. And then of course seeing how Guilliman and the Legion respond to that betrayal, the lightning fast adaptability firsthand. It's a really enjoyable one. Admittedly, the style of this read can be a little awkward to get to grips with. However, if you persevere, you are definitely richly rewarded. And so it's one I particularly recommend if you're a fan of Guilliman and the Boys in Blue. And so that rounds out my top 3 recommended reads for Roboute Guilliman: The Unremembered Empire, Ruinstorm, and Know No Fear. For the honourable mentions, I really recommend you round out the full Imperium Secundus storyline by reading the novels Pharos and Angels of Caliban by authors Guy Haley and Gav Thorpe. Roboute doesn't have an over amount of spotlight in these, which is why they don't crack my top 3. However, I feel it's very important to read the full storyline to really get a handle on the Guilliman who emerges on the other side, how the Primarchs managed to get past their difficulties here, but also how deep those scars go, how they will very much remain a part of their future relationships to come. You get Guilliman snapping the Lion Sword in two due to El Johnson's lies and actions, and you get some great brotherly scenes with the Angel, and then even the disagreements between them as well. So it's a fascinating storyline from beginning to end, and one I think doesn't get enough discussion regarding the heresy. However, all in all, that's it. So as always everyone, what do you think? What do you think of my Horus Heresy top 3 recommendations for Roboute Guilliman? And what do you think of my honourable mentions with Pharos and Angels of Caliban? As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow, and if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.